In the sun-drenched suburbs of Los Angeles, Roy's mornings are not a celebration of a new day, but a series of rigid survival trials performed with trembling hands and a shallow, restricted breath. He wakes to a house that is less a home and more a sterile laboratory, where every surface must be devoid of dust and every ritual must be completed before the day can truly begin. He takes his medication not to heal, but to numb the screaming static in his brain, moving through his three-step rituals with a grim intensity that reveals the internal suffering behind every twitch of his eye. His partner, Frank Mercer, is the only bridge to the outside world, a man who navigates life with a casual ease that Roy can only observe from behind the safety of his sunglasses. Frank is the rope that pulls the marks in, setting up short cons that Roy executes with a cold professional brilliance that masks the growing tsunami of anxiety building behind his ribs. They pose as federal agents, preying on the elderly with a practiced sincerity that should make Roy feel powerful, yet the moment the sun glares too brightly through an open door, his facade begins to crumble. The struggle for control is a mental war that Roy is slowly losing, even as he stacks his ceramic dog with the petty cash of his victims and eats his solitary tuna dinners in a house that reeks of cleaning products. When he accidentally flushes his medication down the drain, the thin thread holding his sanity together snaps, and the resulting week of self-imposed isolation is a descent into a private hell of bleached floors and faded walls. He is a man who bases his entire identity on the ability to manipulate others, yet he cannot even walk through a supermarket without a looming sense of panic if he isn't in the right queue. Frank eventually forces his way back in, sensing the rapid deterioration of his mentor and arranging a meeting with a therapist, Dr. Harris Klein, as a last-ditch effort to save their partnership. Roy enters the clinic with a heart hammering against his ribs, forced to confront the wreckage of his failed marriage and the ghost of a child he never knew, all for the sake of a new prescription. The trial medication is a small hope, but the real shift happens when the doctor makes a call that Roy has spent 14 years avoiding, opening a door that he thought had been sealed forever. Suddenly, the world expands into a territory Roy is entirely unprepared to navigate as he learns that he has a daughter named Angela, who is eager to meet the father she was told was long dead. On the way to the park, his mind is a chaotic mess of racing thoughts, wondering if his mental prison will drive this girl away before he can even find his footing as a parent. He watches happy families from a distance, feeling like an alien observer in a world of genuine connection, his tics flaring as he chain smokes through a pack of cigarettes. When he finally sees Angela skateboarding toward him, his breath catches in his throat, and for a fleeting second, the rigid demands of his OCD are eclipsed by the sheer, terrifying reality of fatherhood. Their first meeting at a diner is a delicate negotiation between a man who has everything a certain way and a teenager who represents the very chaos he has spent a lifetime avoiding. Angela is free-spirited and messy, her infectious energy clashing with his ordered world, yet instead of retreating, Roy finds himself taking a deep breath and letting her in, if only by a few inches. The transition from a solitary con artist to a hesitant father is not a smooth one, but Roy finds himself tracing Angela's phone number onto his palm with a genuine smile that he hasn't felt in a decade. He agrees to Frank's long con idea not out of greed, but perhaps out of a newfound desire to provide, or perhaps because the chaos of a daughter has made the chaos of a high-stakes crime feel more manageable. He prepares for the role of a wealthy international banker, selecting his suits and practicing his catchphrases with the same precision he uses for his cleaning rituals, yet his focus is constantly pulled back to the girl now living in his house. When Angela shows up at his door after a fight with her mother, Roy's sterile environment is invaded by pizza boxes and teenage moods, forcing him to adapt in ways he never thought possible. He watches her sleep on his couch, covering her with a blanket in a rare moment of tenderness that suggests the man beneath the tics is still capable of love. He is caught between two lives. The professional liar who can manipulate anyone, and the father who desperately wants to be the man his daughter thinks he is. As the days pass, Roy finds himself caught in a domestic whirlwind that challenges every ritual he has ever leaned on, as eggs are dismissed for ice cream, and his pristine living room becomes a clutter of teenage life. He rushes to his therapist in the grip of a panic attack, yet he leaves with a newfound resolve to try being honest and open, a concept that is entirely foreign to a man who makes his living through deception. He shops for groceries with Angela, bonding over the simple act of choosing vegetables, and eventually, they are laughing together in a kitchen covered in pasta sauce. He watches her eat through the haze of his cigarette smoke, a warm glow of pride, replacing the cold anxiety that usually defines his evenings, wondering if he finally deserves this small slice of happiness. Even the long con against the shady businessman Chuck Frechette feels easier when he has someone to come home to, and his bond with Chuck over their respective daughters feels like the most honest thing he has ever said. However, the world of a con artist is built on shifting sand, and the piece Roy has found is far more fragile than he realizes. The cracks begin to show when Roy finds himself worried sick after Angela stays out late, the rhythmic clicking of his pool light switch marking the hours of her absence in desperate sets of three. Their resulting fight is a collision of her need for freedom and his need for control, a heartbreaking moment where Roy feels the familiar urge to push away the very thing he has learned to cherish. He tells her he has things a certain way, a rejection that sends her storming out into the night and leaves him standing in the silence of his perfectly ordered, empty house. But the love he has found for her is a force he can no longer ignore, and he chases her down, finally admitting that his work is a shadow he doesn't want to cast over her life. In a moment of weakness or perhaps a misguided attempt at bonding, he agrees to teach her the trade, leading her through a makeshift training session that ends in a small-scale con at a local laundromat. Watching her succeed fills him with a dangerous mix of pride and fear, and he insists she return the money, desperately trying to be a responsible father in a world that has no room for responsibility. As the long con nears its final phase, Roy finds himself feeling more alive and less afraid than he has ever been, his excitement spilling over into his therapy sessions as he describes Angela's natural talent for the craft. He is no longer crippled by the fear of the outside world, his mental prison appearing to have been dismantled by the simple presence of his daughter. He smiles alone in the dark while listening to her voicemails, a man reborn who believes he has finally outrun his demons and found a path to redemption through a girl he never knew existed. Even Frank's celebratory hugs and kisses no longer trigger a violent collapse, as Roy moves through his days with a newfound confidence that even surprises his cashier at the supermarket. On the final day of summer school, he is the first parent there, his heart swelling with a genuine joy that he is forced to stand back and simply take in. He is ready to leave the life of a con artist behind, ready to use his savings to build a future for Angela, unaware that he is standing in the middle of a perfectly crafted trap. The final execution of the con at the airport is a frantic race against time, with Angela bravely volunteering to help, further cementing her place as the only family Roy has left in the world. He adds her to the signature list for his safety deposit box, a gesture of ultimate trust that signifies he is ready to give her everything he has worked for. The exchange of the bags goes smoothly, and for a moment, it seems they have pulled off the perfect crime, with Roy and Angela heading toward a celebratory sunset with $80,000 in hand. But the illusion shatters with a scream as Chuck Frechette appears out of the darkness, his furious pursuit turning their victory into a desperate high-speed flight for survival. The chaotic exit leaves Roy's tics flaring uncontrollably as he tries to process what went wrong, his heart breaking as he sees the fear in Angela's eyes during their tense getaway. He locks himself back in his house, wallowing in a familiar sadness that feels even heavier now that he has tasted the possibility of a different life. The cold reality of Roy's situation is revealed with a devastating precision when he runs out of medication and discovers that the pills he has been relying on are nothing more than useless supplements. The discovery that his doctor, his partner, and even his daughter were all part of a calculated performance is a betrayal that tears his world apart, leaving him standing in the middle of a freight container on a rooftop. Every ritual he performed, every emotion he felt for Angela, and every dollar he had saved was a carefully managed asset in Frank's own long con. He finds himself alone and penniless, realizing that the child he thought was his was just an actor, and the ex-wife he reached out to had lost their baby years ago. The haunting guilt he felt was used against him by the person he trusted most, leaving him with nothing but the empty routine of a life he thought he had escaped. It is a shattering of a man's soul, a reminder that in the world of the con, the only thing more dangerous than the lie is the person who makes you want to believe it is true. A year passes, and the man who once lived in a house of sterile rituals now stands in a local carpet store, moving through his day with a quiet, resigned dignity that is far removed from his former brilliance. When Angela walks in with her boyfriend, the encounter is not one of anger or revenge, but of a tired recognition that some stories are simply meant to end in silence. He doesn't chase her or demand his money back. He simply looks at the girl who once made him feel like a father and tells her that he is retired, that the man she played is truly gone. He has found a different kind of peace, one that isn't built on the shifting sands of deception, but on the simple, honest reality of a life without secrets. He goes home to a house that is no longer a laboratory, but a home, greeting a wife who is genuinely carrying his child and preparing for a dinner that doesn't need to be eaten in sets of three. Redemption, it seems, did not come from the wealth of a successful con or the thrill of the hunt, but from the wreckage of his former self, leaving him with a glimmer of hope for a future that is finally his own. The truth is that we all carry a collection of lies to protect ourselves from the sharp edges of the world, but sometimes those lies are the only things that allow us to become the people we were meant to be. Roy Waller's journey was a cruel lesson in the high cost of trust, yet it was the very betrayal he suffered that finally shattered the prison of his mind. He lost everything he thought he valued, only to find the one thing he actually needed. A sense of belonging that didn't require a performance or a perfect set of rituals. We are often conned by our own expectations, chasing ghosts of a life we think will make us whole, only to find that wholeness comes from embracing the beautiful, unpredictable mess of being human. The tragedy of his past has become the foundation of his present, a quiet reminder that even the deepest scars can eventually fade into the texture of a life lived with open eyes. In the end, we are all just looking for someone to look past our tics and our fears, hoping that even in a world built on cons, there is something real worth holding onto. As the lights dim on Roy's story, we are left to wonder about the masks we wear in our own daily lives and the walls we build to keep others at a safe distance. We seek out certainty in a world that offers none, clinging to our schedules and our habits as if they were life rafts in a storm that will never end. Roy's house is finally quiet, but it is a silence born of peace rather than the desperate avoidance of noise, a subtle shift that marks the difference between surviving and truly living. The flickering fluorescent lights may still hum, and the pool may still gather leaves, but they no longer have the power to stop him from reaching for the hand of his wife or the promise of his unborn child. Perhaps the ultimate con is believing we are ever truly in control, and the ultimate victory is finally letting that belief go to make room for the light. It is in the cracks of our shattered dreams that the true self is finally allowed to breathe, rising from the cold reality into a world where we no longer have to hide who we are. The journey towards self-forgiveness is a long and lonely road, paved with the memories of the people we used to be and the mistakes we can never truly erase. Roy stands as a testament to the idea that you can lose your fortune and your pride, yet still walk away with a soul that is finally, irrevocably clean. His story reminds us that while the world may be full of predators and victims, there is always a third option. The person who chooses to stop playing the game altogether. We are all conned eventually, whether by a partner, a stranger, or our own desperate hearts, but the measure of a life is how we stand back up once the illusion is gone. The haunting guilt that once fueled his fire has become the cool water of his redemption, allowing him to plant roots in a reality that is finally, beautifully his own. We close this chapter knowing that while the con may never end, the need for it can wither away, replaced by the simple, enduring power of a truth that no longer needs to be hidden. The shadows of Roy's former life may always linger in the corners of his mind, but they no longer dictate the rhythm of his heart or the depth of his breath. He has exchanged the thrill of the take for the steady pulse of a quiet afternoon, a trade that any man who has truly suffered would make without a second thought. His hands are still, his eyes are clear, and for the first time in 14 years, he is not waiting for the other shoe to drop or the door to fail. The world continues its chaotic dance outside his carpet store, full of marks and masters, but he is merely a spectator now, a man who has paid his debt and found his way home. We leave him there, in the soft glow of a life well earned, a reminder that even the most broken of us can find a way to mend if we are brave enough to face the cold reality. The con is over, the performance has ended, and Roy Waller is finally, at long last, just a man standing in the light of a brand new day. In the final accounting of Roy's life, we see that the greatest trick was not the one Frank played on him, but the one Roy played on himself by believing he was beyond saving. Every tick, every ritual, and every panicked breath was a plea for a connection that he thought he had forfeited long ago in the wreckage of his first family. The journey through the fire of betrayal was the only way to burn away the armor he had built, leaving behind a man who could finally look at his own reflection without flinching. We are all searching for a daughter who doesn't exist or a doctor who can fix the unfixable, failing to see that the healing begins the moment we stop running from ourselves. Roy's story is a mirror for our own search for meaning in a world that often feels like a cruel and calculated game of chance. May we all find the strength to stop the count, to break the set of three, and to step out of the shadows into a life that is as real and as honest as the breath we are taking right now.